Good afternoon and welcome to the afternoon session of the July 15th, 2021 Lane County Board of Commissioners meeting. We are now on item 12 in our agenda, I believe, which is that correct, Diana? Well,
that is correct.
Which is County Council 12A, Order 21-06-15-05 in the matter of approving renewal of purchased insurance policies and delegating authority to the risk manager to execute renewal documents. And I believe Lisa Lacey, our risk manager, and Ron Cutter, Senior Vice President, Public Sector Practice Leader, BBNW, are here to guide us through this discussion. Lisa, if you would.
I could. Also with us is Kim Morgan. We're going to talk a little bit about cyber insurance, and she's here to answer any questions you might have about that. And as you all know, Miranda's here. Miranda hopped in when I went on an emergency medical leave. She did all the data collection and all the applications and really got us to this point. So I did ask her to join us today. We're looking at a status quo request, same coverages as last year, and with the exception of cyber. And I'll just pass it over to Ron now, and he can take over.
Thank you, Lisa. Can everyone confirm that you're seeing my screen of a premium/rate comparison?
Affirmative.
Okay, awesome. Great. Thank you. So I'll talk a little bit about the insurance market as a whole. Commissioner Farr, you can turn me off because you've heard this spiel last week.
It's been 2 hours since I last heard it, though. So
yeah. So the insurance market is very difficult right now. We're in what we classify as a hard insurance market. So insurance goes in cycles, and we've been in what most would consider a soft market cycle for some time. And so a hard market cycle is characterized by a couple of things. Number one, significant rate increases. And number two, insurance carrier capacity that diminishes. So you have insurance companies that will say, hey, maybe we've been giving you, $50 million worth of earthquake, but going forward, we're only going to give you 25. So we are definitely seeing rate increases this year. And fortunately, we've been able to maintain the coverages that we have in place. However, it's just coming at a higher price tag. You can see on the premium rate comparison in front of you, we have it broken out by line of coverage: property, crime, cyber liability, excess liability, another layer of excess liability, your med mal gap, and your workers' compensation. So if we start at the top there, the property, now this is with Travelers Insurance Company, and they are insuring your buildings and your contents and any property in the open. And you can see we're going from a premium of $322,900 to $359,429, or an increase in rate of 6.9%. Given the market conditions, we are very, very pleased with this result. We are delivering increases 5 or 6 times that on a percentage basis. I was just on a call yesterday that their property increase is over 50%. And so, it's a very difficult market. So at 6.9%, we are very happy with that. Your crime coverage, that would be theft of money in general. So in most cases, that's an embezzlement type situation. So we are seeing some increase there as well, much less on a dollar standpoint, just from $5,500 to just over $6,000. The cyber liability is a little bit confusing as it shows up here on this table. So your cyber liability, of course, that's you have data that you have to protect, and if there's personally identifiable information that is breached, then there are obligations of notification and credit monitoring But really what cyber has become in terms of exposure is more of a ransomware situation. So we've all heard on the news, the last several months of all these companies, businesses, governmental entities have been hacked by bad guys, and their information is held for ransom. And so we're seeing a real prevalence of those types of claims. And as a result, we're seeing insurance companies literally just run for the hills and not want to insure this exposure anymore. I told your insurance team, a couple weeks ago when we went over this, that I think it's not an exaggeration to say that this exposure a year from now could be uninsurable, particularly the ransomware type claims. It's the severity, frequency, and severity of these types of claims have just gone through the roof. So as this is showing up here, you're seeing a big premium reduction, but really what this represents at 11,315 is we had to get an extension to the current policy because your cyber insurer, who's also Travelers, implemented a mandate essentially is that you have to have multi-factor authentication. And I'm not a techie, so I'm not going to try and explain exactly what that is, but it's basically when you're signing into your system and you get a notification on your phone with a certain number, and you got to put that in. So you have to, provide not only a password, but then another layer of security. And so the county is implementing the multi-factor authentication. It takes time to do that, and so Travelers has granted us an extension to get that done. And so that premium is represents what the premium is for the extension. Again, I'm telling all of our governmental customers that the return on investment in IT right now is very high. So to the extent you can invest in, people, infrastructure, systems, consultants, anything like that to further strengthen the county's systems and make them as impenetrable as possible. That is a good, like I say, there's a good return on that investment right now. We have a couple layers of excess liability. So, keep in mind that the county is self-insured. So by, that's a little bit of a misnomer. You're not fully self-insured. You have $1 million self-insured retention. So the first $1 million of any claim is the county's, comes out of the county's pocket. And after that, we have 2 layers of $10 million worth of coverage. So a total of 20 million. So 20 million on top of your $1 million self-insured retention. And you can see those premiums are also going up. It's broken up by layers. We have a $10 million layer, then a secondary $10 million layer. Those premiums going up 35.9% and 31.5% respectively. This is what we're seing in the industry. Any organization that has cops, law enforcement at all, jails, which the county does in fact have. You don't have to do much more than watch the evening news to know that this is a very, very difficult risk right now. And insurers are just, again, much like cyber, very nervous about insuring anything law enforcement related. We have this med-mal gap policy. So that's a policy that we procured a few years ago. That the intent of this is the county is providing services, mental health services out of the federally qualified health centers. The intent is claims arising out of the FQHCs would be covered by the feds. That happens in most cases. Sometimes it doesn't. And so this is what we call a gap policy, that if a claim arises out of the FQHC, it is not picked up by the feds, it would be picked up by this policy. And then lastly, your excess workers' compensation. We have a decent increase in your payroll. So you can see here, going from $87 million in payroll to 106. So your workers' compensation premiums are based, partially on what your payroll projections are, as well as the rate. So as the payroll goes up, and I think this number reflects your payroll from 2 years ago. Last year, we were locked in for an additional year, and so we have an increase to this. So that plus a 9.4% increase in rate takes your premium from 171,000 to 229,000. So all in all, we're just over a 17% increase with all lines of coverage. Again, given what we're seeing in the marketplace, well, I know, you know, this can be a bitter pill to swallow, some of these increases. You know, it's just, we are just going through a really, really tough time in the insurance industry. And I'm pleased that we were able to maintain the coverages that the county has had. And I'm not having to come and say, hey, we can't find any cyber coverage, because that day may be around the corner in the not too distant future. So any questions?
Questions from commissioners? Oh, yes, Commissioner Farr. Because Commissioner Farr has digested this twice, so he's more on top of this than we are.
And Chair, just a slight report that the news, even though MWMC does not have jails or police forces, it was not a dissimilar story that we heard on Friday at MWMC.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair. Yes, Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you, Chair. Ron, you know, we've been having quite a lot of discussion about third-party liability on behavioral health services. Is this our medical malpractice gap is pretty small limit, and you know, what does our excess liability cover some of that third-party liability on behavioral health practice, or is that something we're still you know, kind of shifting in the wind about?
Yeah, a little of both. So the one claim that has come up that has everyone's attention, which was the this is a public meeting. I don't know.
Yeah.
Can I talk about specifics? Anyway.
We know what you're referencing. Let's put it that way.
Okay. So that claim is covered by your excess liability of $20 million. So that excess insurer is overseeing that claim. If there is any claim payments made above your $1 million self-insured retention, yes, that is covered. There's been a lot of conversation though with Steve Dingle and Lisa, both Lisas and their team, about services, mental health services being, you know, redirected, I guess, if you will, from the state of Oregon back to the counties under an intergovernmental agreement, and the additional exposures that will bring to the county. And we are exploring additional insurance options to cover that, not reflected here. That would be outside of what we're talking about. We have not come to a point where we're ready to propose or present an insurance vehicle to cover that. We're still kind of winding through those conversations with various underwriters and trying to get insurance companies to grasp what it is we're trying to cover, number one. And number two, have a comfort level with it. And number three, give us a premium that is tolerable given, given the risks. So yeah, we are actively working on that.
That clarifies for me where at least what we're being presented today doesn't include that possible additional policy. So I want to make sure I understood that.
Yes, Mr. Dingle.
Chair Bernie, Commissioner Bozovich, we've actually, Alex Kyler has really been point on this with the legislature, and just last week we learned that OHA has set aside, I think, somewhere between $5 and $6 million because the counties basically banded together and raised the issue that you just discussed. And where it stands right now is we're being told that OHA is going to buy insurance to cover this. But as as Mr. Cutter said, all the counties are running into the same issue, which is when they're out talking to insurance companies, they don't have any frame of reference for this. And so we're getting sort of wildly, and Ron can speak to this, they just don't know. It's not like they can look at it and say you have so many vehicles or so many employees, they just don't know. So we're waiting, and it's not totally clear how that is going to work, whether we are going to present, that Ron is going to come up with a product that covers that, and then we present the bill to OHA, or OHA is going to go out and try and buy a policy for all the counties. But that is in, at least that's where it was last week. And I will tell you that this is a moving target day to day. But right now we think we're going to get some financial relief paying for that extra insurance.
Thank you, Mr. Dingle. Commissioner Bozovich, were you through?
Yes, that was the main thing I was curious about. Thank you.
Thank you. Other commissioners? Mr. Cutter, I see no further questions from the board, and I have none. It's interesting to hear you discuss a soft or whatever market versus a hard insurance market. To me, that means that the ratios on the bets are changing, and they're trying to determine where the point is.
Yeah. I mean, so there's a little saying in the industry that the underwriting community, they're motivated by two things. It's either fear or greed. And so in a soft market, it's a greed. They're trying to increase their books of businesses, if you will. We are absolutely in a fear mode right now, where the insurance community is just scared and they don't want to insure anything that has any hair on it. So yes, it's a tough cycle right now.
Right. Yes, and Lisa, I noticed you wanted to say something?
I would, just as far as the cyber insurance goes, if we're able to get quotes on that, we'll bring that back to the board as a separate item.
Thank you very much. Either commissioners or any one of the presenters, is there anything else that we need to know before I entertain a motion? Doesn't look that way. Okay. Is there a motion on the floor? Vice Chair Farr.
Chair Bernie, I would move Order 2106-1505 in the matter of approving renewal of purchased insurance policies and delegating authority to the risk manager to execute renewal documents.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Is there a second? It has been moved by Vice Chair Farr and seconded by Commissioner Bozovich. Approval of Order 21-06-15-05. Is there discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Let the record show that Order 21-06-15-05 made by Vice Chair Farr, seconded by Commissioner Bozovich, has been approved unanimously, 5-0. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dingle, item 12B, are there any announcements?
Yes, there is one announcement. I'd like to announce that I have filled one of the two openings that I have in my shop, the support staff. Alicia Leonard, yesterday was her first day. So if you see her showing up, she'll be doing things like what Ms. Silburn did, public records requests, those kinds of things. And I hope to get the other position, I hope to make an offer to another person tomorrow. So we'll be back to being fully staffed. The other announcement I had is I remember last week I mentioned that there had been a suggestion or a request from a group asking if the board would like to be briefed on the possibility of litigation as a plaintiff around the Holiday Farm fire. And I just raised that in announcements, and I thought that the board would discuss it or decide if we got 3 head nods for that, and then I would organize it. And I guess it just kind of fell off the radar last week. But again, that would be, you've seen some of the litigation that was filed, I believe, a couple of weeks ago. It's along the line. It's along those lines. This is a lot. this is a law firm that specializes in representing public bodies that have been damaged by wildfires. And those are all the announcements I have.
And is this a request for head nods?
I thought you'd take it up at the or whenever you take it up at the end.
Thank you. You're right. Thank you very much. We are now on item 13, Commissioner's Business, 13A. Do commissioners have any announcements? Yes, Vice Chair Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. And this is really very, very personal indeed, but I hope you'll all be interested that little Eden Badgett was born on Saturday morning at 3:10 a.m. Little Eden is Debbie's and my first grandchild, albeit not biological, our adopted grandchild, a great grandchild, I beg your pardon, is immediately and already a part of our lives. So it's a wonderful moment.
Congratulations. Thank you, Commissioner. Any other announcements? Yes, Commissioner. Thank you for waiting, Commissioner Trieger.
Jazz hands.
That'll work.
I have a few items, just our conversation this morning about frequency of updates on our continuing work on response to COVID and wildfire recovery. And so I just wanted to put out to the group an idea, rather than being prescriptive about holiday farm fire updates necessarily always being more often than once a month, whether the group is in agreement that we'd like to have staff feel free to let us know if there is substantive enough update and or policy issues, such as what we discussed this morning, that would make sense to have a supplemental agenda item around holiday farm fire. So continue with the standing once a month update, but make space and make sure staff knows that they should always ask for a supplemental agenda item when there's something timely or some policy issue to dig into. So I wondered if that is something the group would like to agree to.
Could we have hands rather than head nods on that?
Great.
Commissioner, it looks to me like the group completely agrees.
Thank you. Two other items. One is another head nod request, and then the other is a for your information only. On the head nod request, I want to appreciate my colleagues who gave head nods around working towards a significant and meaningful acknowledgement of Indigenous Peoples Day coming up beginning this October. And in further reflecting, I'd like to ask if similarly, I have head nods to ask staff to look into ways that we might incorporate a regular land acknowledgement into our meetings, especially as we look to returning to physical meetings in the space at Harris Hall, and in consideration of all the changes in the last year and a half since we were meeting in person, not only around COVID and the fires, but our understanding and our reckoning as a society around racial justice and Indigenous peoples and the role that they played long before any of us got here. Harris Hall was built. I think this could be an important way to amplify our commitment to the First Peoples and align with our inclusion work in a more institutional and ongoing way. So considering land acknowledgement at our meetings on some kind of regular basis when we return to work in our physical space at Harris Hall.
Is there any commissioner that wants to speak to that before we ask for head nods? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Maybe if I could just have an example of what a land acknowledgement would sound like.
Thank you for asking, Commissioner. I think the whole point is that seeking head nods is for staff to do exactly that kind of research and bring some examples. It can be as simple as acknowledging the land that we're on, and it can be as involved as more of a statement around why that matters and why we're making the acknowledgement, and engagement with tribal governments and people who currently are in our community with ancestry and linkage to Kalapuya people. I think it can look any number of ways and however we want. The important point is making the acknowledgement.
Thank you, Commissioner. And that sounds a lot, Chair Bernie and Mr. Rickard, that sounds a lot like when Fairfield elementary school was rebuilt, they found artifacts beneath the existing foundations, and they created such a land acknowledgement. So I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, there are several local governments, statewide governments doing it, and sometimes it's as simple as, again, as I said, just there's a regular, what's a radio program podcast I listen to, and just as part of their credits, they just acknowledge this program is produced on Dakota land. It's that simple. So the head nods would be for staff to explore what some of these options might look like and bring them back to us.
Commissioner Bozievich?
So my only concern with this is both archaeological and anthropological studies of the American continent show multiple waves of immigration across the land bridge from Asia over time. And several peoples have peopled this area and have been pushed out by subsequent immigrations. Which land acknowledgement and time period are we acknowledging? The Kaliapua just happened to be the last just before European settlers. But the Kaliapua pushed out a different people prior to that, and those people pushed out a different people. So this gets to be a very sticky wicket if we're going to start acknowledging whose land this originally was, because originally it was unpopulated.
Commissioner Trier, can you respond to that, or is that part of what you're asking us to ask staff to dig into?
I think I'll leave my request as it stands for today and let the more nuanced elements of it surface after a little bit of research has been done.
And finally, Greg, do you anticipate this being a significant an imposition on staff at all?
Sure, Bernie, Commissioner Trigger, I do not. I think knowing that the city of Eugene is pursuing land acknowledgements, several school districts have done that. The University of Oregon, OSU, have recognized the lands is going back to the Kalapuya peoples. But I've not seen much research beyond that, but it would be something worth examining. We're already doing some significant tribal outreach, given our needs around some of the funding requirements of the state that have us looking at tribal relations in behavioral health and criminal justice areas. This would be a companion piece to work already being done.
Well, if that's the case, let's make a call for head nods. All those that head nods or hand nods on this one. Okay.
Terrific, thank you. And then finally, just as a courtesy heads up, with the sheriff's decision to not renew the Bureau of Prison contract, there is a newly formed group that I've been in conversation with that are working to see if we can't retain or bring some kind of reentry services to Lane County. Been in regular communication with them. Folks are working quickly because of a short turnaround on the application to the Bureau of Prisons, but it's a newly formed nonprofit, and this may come before us in the near future, depending on the outcome of that application, for a discussion about a lease agreement to use the facility at Community Corrections that's currently slated for decommissioning. Just a heads up.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other commissioners that would like to make any announcements at this time? Commissioner Bozievich.
So I guess we're kind of mixing announcements and agenda team requests, because that last series was a bunch of head nod requests. So are we, which place are we? I don't have an announcement, but I do have some requests for head nods.
Well, as chair, I would ask you to stick with the agenda, but since I obviously haven't and we've been nodding heads, please have at it.
So my first one's fairly simple. I got an email today from the city of Florence that's under a deadline of having to gather letters by the 21st, which is before our next meeting, to support their renewal of their designation as a Coast Guard city. And I don't know if you all are familiar with the fact that the city of Florence was designated a Coast Guard city, one of only a couple in the whole United States, because of their strong support of the Coast Guard in that town. And I was looking for head nods is maybe allowing the chair to sign that on behalf of the board in the interim without having to come back for a vote. Or if I can't get that, I'll send one that's a personal, just from me. But I was kind of hoping maybe we could get something that was from the board supporting their application to be a Coast Guard city, renewal of their designation.
Are there any commissioners that want to speak to that before I request head nods? Okay. Hand or head nods, how many people support that? Well, unfortunately, Commissioner, you will not be the only one signing that. Thank you.
I'll see if I can get them to give us a form, letter that we can put on our letterhead and make it easy for you and I.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for that.
Forgive me. Am I presuming that that would have two signatures, one from the chair and one from you, the commissioner whose district that is in?
That would probably work well for them. So, thank you. I appreciate that. The other one, this is not necessarily a request for head nods, but earlier Commissioner Trigger made reference to written testimony on the budget that had come in. I've seen one email that references our budget. So if there has been actual testimony that's come into separate commissioners that's supposed to maybe have gone to the whole commission, I would just request, I try and make a habit of this, if I get something that was really meant for the entire board that got emailed just to me, I'll forward it to Diana so she can make sure the whole board gets it and gets it, into our written public testimony, just for future reference, because I've only seen one email so far that even references our budget at least in the last week or so. And then I'll wait to talk about fire litigation to last, because I just want to make sure we don't forget about that for our county council. But I would also like to see if I can get 3 head nods to at least have something come before the board in the very near future, not wait a month, to talk about providing policy direction around House Bill 2289. And I think, Chair Bernie, you said something that you would like to have it come sooner, but you and I have expressed that, but we haven't seen 3 commissioners express that. So I just want to make sure we've got 3 and we're not going off of just 2 commissioners' wishes.
Well, if I may, Commissioner, logistically, my understanding is that after next week, with the agenda is completely full, we can look at that, but the soonest would be 3 weeks, right? Or 4 weeks, because we have 2 weeks that are down. So I'm just saying, logistically, see what happens. Commissioner Buck wants to speak to this.
Just this particular item, because I know you have more. In the meantime, if we just don't have the time for our meeting, perhaps we could request from the planning department a written report on how they're implementing that until we're able to have a full discussion at the board level.
I guess that we'll have to do, other than me making a motion under other business to provide some policy direction now. The bill is barely 2 pages of written material once you get rid of the header on the first page and the signature lines on the 3rd page. It's a short bill, very easy to read and understand. So I kind of feel like, it would be very easy for this board to provide some direction even now to staff about how to interpret some of that. But I will wait. 3 weeks is still kind of long, but I think that's a time when we can talk about this, and in the interim, getting a written report helps folks formulate their direction to staff on the policy side of this. Sort of like, I kind of wish at some point we had been given the opportunity to make a policy decision around the new Dogami seismic maps, and the requirement for geotechnical studies was never brought to the board to make a policy decision on. Staff made a determination that was a policy decision. And I think we need to be a little bit more cognizant of what's policy and what's code. And we need to be making the policy decisions for staff. So I'm okay with that if everybody's okay with getting a written report in the interim and maybe tentatively penciling something in for 3 weeks.
Commissioner Bozovich, I think that really, I want to be respectful of Commissioner Buck here. I know that she's been pouring her heart and soul into this. So I think that if you're willing to do that, that does several things. It solves sort of some problems. One, it validates the fact that we all feel a sense of urgency, and we all want to make sure we do what we can to get things moving as quickly as possible. Two, it validates that we respect staff and what their thoughts are and thinking is, because they're only now beginning to look at implementing something that's brand new. And I think it allows us to work within a reasonable period of time to, if there's even a need, imprint some policy guidance, because we disagree with any of the thinking of staff. It allows us to do that. So if you're willing to, as Commissioner Buck suggested, allow staff to provide that to us and then try and schedule this for the next available board meeting, I see no issue here. Do we still need, oh, I'm sorry, maybe Commissioner Farr.
Not an issue, just an acquiescence that I would presume a report would include anything that is organically happening in staff to facilitate the swift movement of the permits and swift approval of moving forward with building. Things that can happen without board direction.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Are there any other comments? If there are none, Commissioner Bozovich, does that meet with your approval?
Yeah, it does. I just want to kind of remind the board, this was actually approved on a 27-3 vote on May 27th by the second House to approve it. So it's been a known factor of exactly what the language was coming to the governor's desk since, more than 2 weeks. So I just, the fact this is new is not really absolutely true. And it was known it was also had an emergency clause on it, which makes it effective immediately upon signature. So it's actually the law right now. And if we're not processing applications now under that, we're not in conformance. My apology.
Tell them we're not here.
Yeah, it's weird because for some reason it'll ring on my Mac. No, it's coming in on my phone that's silenced. Being in too close a proximity of too many Apple devices.
Well, I think
you understand a little bit of my frustration around this, and getting some of the pushback that seems to be, of not being ready to implement, not getting good answers, and I just I know that people are wanting to be fair to staff and all that, but I'm saying, I'd like to clear the decks in the planning side of this, partly because I've got so many constituents that are coming to me daily with horror stories about not receiving permits from Lane County. I've shared those with the administrator and other folks in public works and land management almost on a daily basis. Sometimes I agree that it's the permittee's fault that they don't understand the system and they've messed up somewhere. but quite often it's just a matter of people have been in the system forever and are being told now that the only reason they're not getting their permit processed is fire permits are ahead of them, and they're in for a land use item. And this bill basically clears the land use deck for fire victims. And that's my frustration, you know, where I've got folks that really want to build a house in my district or repair a house, and they're being held up over a legal lot verification that staff won't get to. You know, that's where my frustration comes from. And this bill basically eliminates a lot of work for staff and should eliminate a lot. It does create a little bit because they're going to have to find a way to take something and go directly to building permit. But, you know, we really, you know, there is some frustration behind this just because it's not the first time I brought this issue of our permit system to the fore in the last year, 10 years I've been a commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Buck, did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I don't hear or sense any pushback on talking about how to get the policy implementation on 2289. What we do need to be able to allow staff to do their job. And this way of allowing them to do an initial report for us, knowing that it's a concern of the board, and then being able to follow up with a discussion allows them to do.
Thank you. Is there, well, I would just like to say, I think more than one commissioner shares the frustration. I think we all do. People on the ground do. We're moving forward on this. I think we've got a path forward. Is there any, never perfect, is there any other commissioner that would like to, I don't know if we're on announcements or not, but anyone else got anything for where we are right now? Commissioner Bozovich, were you through? I apologize.
The only thing I want to remind the chair of is don't forget about the fire litigation question that the county council brought up, whether or not we want to have a work session or exec session on that.
Why don't you articulate that and we will do a head nod, if you would.
I frankly am not terribly interested in this litigation, so having me bring it forward, okay. I wasn't planning on supporting having a session on it because it's looking to try and find somebody liable for the Holiday Farm fire, which is most likely another public body at best, and then suing them for our damages, which we were 75% reimbursed from FEMA for the most part, whatever we incurred. So I'm not willing to really look at going after EWEB or BPA or some other utility for the cause of this fire and getting reimbursed. So that's what that's what they're asking us to look at, is litigating whoever they feel is responsible for this fire. And right now, the signs point to another public agency.
Thank you, Commissioner, for articulating the request and your position on it. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. Other than what County Council has mentioned at the meeting, I really have no description or document to look at as to what they're even asking of us to be able to make a decision one way or the other. So is there, Council, is there something that you can forward to us about this so we know who the parties are, what's the ask fully? I just don't have enough information at this point.
I can check with them. The purpose of the executive session would be to, I believe, based on my conversation with the attorney, would be to explain what this type of litigation involves. Commissioner Bozovich is exactly correct. Who the potential defendants would be, and their experience with representing. I believe they represented the city of Paradise and some of those counties that suffered wildfires in California. So I can ask if they have some materials, but I think it was really, it would be like an informational presentation. There wouldn't be an ask at that point to sue anybody. It would just be explaining to you basically what Commissioner Bozovich said. This is how the litigation works. This is generally how we identify who's responsible. These are the kind of damages that we ask for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Generic, not specific to any particular defendant.
With that, Chair, I'm willing to have a discussion, but I'm not willing to actually make a decision on any item. Other than that, I just need more information. So if it needs to be an exec session, I'm willing to have that conversation.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Chair Buck, or Chair Bernie, Commissioner Buck, it would be an executive session, and it is exactly what the presentation would involve. And there would not be an ask for you to join any litigation at that point.
Is there any other commissioner that would like to talk to this? In that case, while just letting you know, I'm completely with Commissioner Buck, and yet also I think Commissioner Bozovich makes a good point. If we've been reimbursed 75% of the costs, what's really the point here? But I have no problem with getting more information. All those that want to provide a head nod for this being an item for executive session, more information, please raise your hands. Okay. There you go.
I will arrange that, and Commissioner Buck, I will check and see if there is any material that they can provide ahead of that executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Dingle. Is there anything else for this hybrid item 13A, which obviously we're off of just announcements? Seeing nothing. Is there item 13B, future board assignment requests, which I guess that's really, we just did one, but yes, Vice Chair Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Thank you. In December 2016, when the Board of County Commissioners appointed James Manning as senator, we knew that Senator Manning would be the first African American to represent Lane County in the legislature, and we went forward with that, knowing that would be the case. What we did not know, Chair Bernie, and everyone listening, is the powerful presence that Senator Manning's life partner, LaWanda Manning, would provide in the state legislature. Not only in the legislature, but in every circle that she touched. LaWanda Manning was a powerful advocate for people whose voices were previously not heard loud enough. She has been a strong advocate for bettering the lives and bettering the conditions of people in our community. Because of that, Chair Bernie, I am hoping that I can get support for a resolution to honor LaWanda Manning. I read some words this morning that could be easily wrapped into a resolution. I do have a sample resolution that Mr. Kyler provided to me, which has a series of whereas and therefore. So what I'd like to do is read the words once again from this morning that I stated about LaWanda Manning, and ask that we request Mr. Kyler prepare a resolution using the words from the statement that I'm about to make to form a resolution for us to pass during perhaps emergency business or at the appropriate place during next Tuesday's very crowded board meeting, Chair Bernie. So moving forward with that, I'm asking that the board support this. We mourn the loss of LaWanda Joyce Manning. In her death, we come together in grief, but also in celebration of the person she was and the legacy she leaves. A servant leader, LaWanda passed away June 11th after an evening spent beside her husband, Senator James I. Manning Jr., as they awarded scholarships to 6 Kalapuya High School graduates on behalf of the Oregon Black Education Foundation. Always beside Master Sergeant Manning through a highly decorated Army career, she too spent her time in service to others. A devoted partner, she was Chief of Staff to her husband of 43 years at the time of her death. A quiet and powerful presence, standing with Senator Manning in pursuit of a more just and equitable society. A person of conscience, she was an example to others of how to pay it forward, show kindness, be humble, and change the world. Undaunted by the challenges she faced, LaWanda Manning was a force, a champion, and an inspiration to women, to young people, to people of color. Her indomitable spirit survives her passing from this earth. We are better for knowing her, and we will honor her life through our leadership in service to others. And it therefore may sound something like, therefore, the Lane County Board of Commissioners honors LaWanda Manning for her humanitarian work and contributions to the creation of a more just and equitable society. Now, those aren't the exact words that I would hope and expect Mr. Kyler would bring back to us for consideration next week, but that is the intent of the resolution. So with that, Chair Bernie, I will turn it over to the board to discuss and/or give me a head nod of acquiescence.
I think we're ready for head nods. All those that agree with this resolution, that we will put it in an already crowded, as it should be, agenda for next week, please raise your hands. I might also say, Vice Chair, that I'm going to presume you will be joining me, but that allows us to read that at the memorial service, which will be held the next day for Mrs. Manning.
The service, thank you, Chair Bernie. The service will be at 2 o'clock at Willamette Christian Center on Wednesday. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner. Are there any other future board assignment requests? Seeing none, this is the moment that Greg Rakoff has been waiting for.
Chair Bernie, Commissioners, yes, it is.
No.
Okay. And I will ask for your help on this. Assignments include, and perhaps are not limited to, moving forward with the COVID-19 response and recovery reports to every other week as we are best able, moving forward, understanding that as issues emerge and trends in the pandemic continue, we have the ability to bring it back. That the holiday farm fire will continue to be a report once a month, but that we will remind staff, and it's my understanding from Diana Jones that this is a standing directive that policy issues should be brought forward to the board in a timely manner, but should be forwarded as needed. So that is more just a reinforcement of existing policy. Is that sufficient and accurate? Does that work for commissioners?
Yes, I'm seeing nods.
Research the incorporation of a regular land acknowledgement into board meetings and bring that recommendation back to the board. Prepare for signature signing by both the chair and the district commissioner for the support of the renewal of naming Florence as a Coast Guard city. Prepare and bring forward in 3 weeks' time a written report by land management staff on how HB 2289 will be administered. Does that accurately capture?
I'm going to ask commissioners to correct me, but my understanding of the conversation was that if we can in 3 weeks' time to schedule this on the board agenda. So I think the staff report would want to be a little sooner than that. Is that, do my fellow commissioners?
If I may jump in quickly, the earliest we can do with this is 4 weeks. 3 weeks is a downtime, so I'm just trying to get clarification on the dates. It's got to be 4 weeks at the earliest.
That's just operationally, yeah.
Operationally, yeah.
And that is a written report for a work session on the topic? Is that what you're asking for?
Commissioner Buck made the request.
I think the written report will be how they're currently implementing the actual bill, so that we are then prepared with questions when we can do an in-person or a live meeting with the department director.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification. And Greg, before you go on, Commissioner Farr has his hand up.
Just Chair Bernie, to agree with you that a report sooner than that, and with Commissioner Buck, that I, in my mind, thought it'd be as early as next Tuesday before we leave for whatever break we may be taking during the down period.
So it is my understanding you're asking for a report back on the implementation of HB 2289 by next week. I'm seeing multiple nods. Okay.
That gives you till next Friday, right? Okay.
Schedule an executive session on the Holiday Farm fire litigation. And then
An information session, yes.
Okay, and then finally, and far from least, prepare for a resolution honoring LaWanda Manning to be brought back to next week's meeting.
Commissioners, I think Greg got it all. Did he miss anything to anyone's mind? Well done, Greg. I can't remember a review of assignments list that long in quite some time. You're the lucky person. Thank you very much. We have no executive session today. Is there other business that needs to come before the board? Seeing none, our next scheduled Board of Commissioner meeting is Tuesday, June 22nd and/or Wednesday, June 23rd. Thank you, commissioners. We got through a lot today. Appreciate it. And this meeting is now adjourned.